King Solomon, recognized as the wisest man to ever live, was endowed by God with unparalleled wisdom, immense wealth, and significant power. However, what truly transpired with this remarkable monarch? How did a man so blessed by God conclude his life in despair, regret, and spiritual ruin? Join us as we explore the untold narrative of Solomon's final day, a day rich with reflections on his grandeur, his failures, and the tragic repercussions of turning away from God. Discover how a king who possessed everything ended up declaring, "Everything is meaningless," and what his tale signifies for us today. Stay with us until the conclusion to witness the profound lessons from Solomon's life that remain relevant to ours. What insights can we gain from his errors? How can we steer clear of the pitfalls that ensnared him? This narrative is not solely about a king. It's about each of us who has grappled with pride, temptation, and the allure of worldly desires. If you find this story motivating and eye-opening, please click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell to ensure you never miss an update. Your support enables us to share more powerful biblical stories and transformative lessons directly with you. We also invite you to share your thoughts. What resonated with you the most regarding Solomon's journey? Leave a comment below. We cherish hearing from our community. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, as these timeless teachings are meant to be shared. Let's delve into the concluding chapter of King Solomon's life and uncover the ultimate truth behind his ascent, his decline, and the heart-wrenching end of the wisest king of Israel. Don't miss this impactful story that could transform your perspective on your own life. Let's begin. King Solomon commenced his reign with remarkable promise. He was the son of David and Bathsheba, chosen by God to succeed to the throne of Israel after David's reign. From the outset, Solomon's path was characterized by divine favor and direction. In 1 Kings 3:5, we learn that the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at Gibeon, saying, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." In reply, Solomon made a request that would shape his legacy. He did not request wealth, longevity, or the demise of his adversaries. Rather, in 1 Kings 3:9, Solomon humbly asked, "Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is capable of governing this great people of yours?" God was exceedingly pleased with Solomon's request. In 1 Kings 3:10-14, God not only bestowed upon Solomon unmatched wisdom, but also promised him riches, honor, and a lengthy life, provided Solomon remained faithful to his commands. Solomon's wisdom was promptly challenged when two women presented themselves before him, each claiming to be the mother of the same child. This incident, documented in 1 Kings 3:16-28, illustrates Solomon's divinely granted discernment. He proposed splitting the living child in two, knowing that the genuine mother would rather relinquish her claim than see her son harmed. The people of Israel were astonished by his wisdom, recognizing that God's wisdom resided with their king. From that point onward, Solomon's reputation spread widely. In 1 Kings 4:29-30, it is recorded, "God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore." Solomon's wisdom surpassed that of all the people of the East and exceeded all the wisdom of Egypt. He composed 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs, 1 Kings 4:32, covering topics of life, nature, leadership, and faith. Solomon's intellect drew the attention of the Queen of Sheba, a powerful ruler who journeyed a considerable distance to test his wisdom with challenging questions. In 1 Kings 10:6-7, she proclaimed, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told to me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard." This meeting underscored that God's blessing on Solomon was not only personal, but also a testament to God's favor upon Israel. However, Solomon's most notable accomplishment was the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, a task his father David had yearned to complete. Solomon's temple, described in 1 Kings chapter 6, was an architectural wonder of its era, built with the finest materials: cedar from Lebanon, gold, silver, and bronze. It took 7 years to finish and served as the spiritual epicenter of Israel, a place where God's presence dwelled among his people. 1 Kings 8:10 through 11. Upon the temple's completion, Solomon led the nation in a powerful prayer of dedication. In 1 Kings 8:22 to 53, he prayed, recognizing God's greatness and imploring him to hear the prayers of his people. Solomon's heartfelt prayer is encapsulated in 1 Kings 8:23. "Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below, you who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way." Under Solomon's reign, Israel achieved unprecedented levels of wealth, power, and influence. Solomon's kingdom was a beacon of prosperity, drawing traders, scholars, and rulers from all corners of the ancient world. As noted in 1 Kings 10:23 through 24, King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The entire world sought an audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had placed in his heart. Solomon's wealth was beyond comprehension. He controlled trade routes connecting Egypt to Mesopotamia, bringing in gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks from far-off lands. 1 Kings 10:22. His fleet of ships returned every 3 years laden with treasures, reflecting his extensive influence. In 1 Kings 10:14, we discover that Solomon's annual income in gold alone amounted to 666 talents, over 25 tons of gold each year. Solomon's throne was unlike any other. Described in 1 Kings 10:18 through 20, it was crafted from ivory and covered with pure gold, featuring 6 steps, each flanked by 12 lions, one on each side of every step. It symbolized his unrivaled power, and there was nothing comparable in any other kingdom. The opulence extended beyond the palace. In 1 Kings 10:21, it is noted that all King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household items in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little worth in Solomon's day. This highlights the sheer abundance and luxury of his reign, where even silver was viewed as commonplace and unworthy. Yet, alongside this vast wealth came temptation. Solomon's power and influence led him to forge alliances with neighboring nations, often solidified through marriage. The Bible informs us in 1 Kings 11:1 through 2 that Solomon loved many foreign women, including Moabites, Ammonites, Sidonians, and Hittites, nations the Lord had warned Israel against intermarrying with, for they would surely turn their hearts toward other gods. Solomon disregarded these warnings. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, 1 Kings 11:3. These unions were more than mere political arrangements. They constituted a direct breach of God's command in Deuteronomy 17:17, which instructed that the king must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. As Solomon's reign advanced, the influence of his foreign wives began to take a significant toll on his spiritual life. The Bible states in 1 Kings 11:4 that as Solomon aged, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. Despite all the wisdom that God had bestowed upon him, Solomon allowed his affection for these women to eclipse his devotion to the God of Israel. Solomon's disobedience was evident through the construction of high places, altars on elevated grounds, where sacrifices and worship to foreign gods occurred. He erected altars for Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, a deity linked to fertility and sensuality, directly opposing the holiness of God, 1 Kings 11:5. He also built high places for Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites, whose worship included child sacrifice, a practice detestable to the Lord, 1 Kings 11:7-8. These actions were not merely cultural acceptance, they were direct violations of God's commandments. In Deuteronomy 12:2-3, God had specifically instructed the Israelites to demolish all high places dedicated to other gods, not to create new ones. Thus, Solomon's actions were a blatant disobedience to God's explicit commands. The tragic irony of Solomon's story is that the very wisdom he had sought to discern between good and evil was now overshadowed by his moral compromises. He became entangled in idolatry, something God had cautioned Israel against since the days of Moses. In Deuteronomy 7:3-4, God commanded, "Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods." Despite these clear admonitions, Solomon's heart was led astray. His divided loyalty starkly contrasts with that of his father David, who, despite his own shortcomings, remained devoted to God. God's displeasure toward Solomon was evident. The Lord had appeared to Solomon twice, first at Gibeon and later in Jerusalem, reaffirming his covenant and warning him to walk faithfully. In 1 Kings 9:6-7, God stated, "But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them." Despite these warnings, Solomon's heart grew hardened. He persisted in constructing shrines and engaging in idolatrous worship. 1 Kings 11:9-10 records God's reaction. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not adhere to the Lord's command. Solomon's tragic turning away serves as a cautionary tale. The man who possessed everything, wisdom, wealth, and divine favor, allowed his heart to be seduced by the allure of foreign gods and the influence of those around him. He exchanged his devotion to God for the acceptance of his wives and the idols they worshipped. The God who had blessed Solomon so richly now pronounced a serious judgment upon him. In 1 Kings 11:11, the Lord declared, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." This prophecy marked the onset of the end for the United Kingdom of Israel. The once magnificent realm that Solomon had built with God's blessing was now heading toward division, conflict, and strife. God's judgment was swift and decisive, yet tempered with mercy. For the sake of David, Solomon's father, God would not remove the kingdom during Solomon's lifetime. Instead, the complete burden of the consequences would fall upon his son, Rehoboam. 1 Kings 11:12-13. God's judgment was a direct result of Solomon's unfaithfulness. Though Solomon had been chosen by God, his heart had strayed too far. In 1 Kings 11:29-31, we see a striking illustration of this when the prophet Ahijah encountered Jeroboam, one of Solomon's officials outside Jerusalem. Ahijah seized his new cloak, tore it into 12 pieces, and said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. On the last day of his life, King Solomon, once the wisest and richest man on earth, sat in his palace, contemplating the splendor that had characterized his reign. His life had been filled with remarkable accomplishments, wisdom that amazed nations, wealth beyond measure, and a kingdom that reached the peak of its power under his rule. Yet his final moments were not filled with the joy of those achievements. Instead, they were marked by a profound sense of loss, disobedience, and regret. Solomon's reflections are poignantly captured in the book of Ecclesiastes, a work often linked to his later years. In Ecclesiastes 1:2, Solomon mourns, "Meaningless, meaningless," says the teacher, "utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." These words resonate with the emptiness that Solomon experienced as he looked back on a life that had deviated from its original purpose. Despite his immense wisdom, he had lost sight of the God who had granted him everything. As he sat in his palace, Solomon's thoughts meandered through the years. He recalled the day he dedicated the temple, a grand and sacred edifice built to honor the Lord, 1 Kings 8. He had prayed fervently for God's presence to fill the temple, and God's glory had descended like a cloud, affirming his approval of Solomon's work. However, now Solomon's heart was distant from those days of devotion. In Ecclesiastes 2:10-11, Solomon reflects on the futility of his endeavors. "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I withheld nothing from my heart. My heart found joy in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I looked at all my achievements and the toil that achieved them, everything was meaningless, a pursuit of the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun." Solomon's wealth allowed him to indulge in every conceivable pleasure. He constructed grand palaces, planted vineyards, amassed treasures, and even imported exotic animals. He had hundreds of servants and musicians to entertain him. Yet, in his old age, all of these accomplishments felt empty. He had chased everything the world offered, but had lost his spiritual direction along the way. The once wise king now recognized that all his achievements were meaningless without God. Ecclesiastes 5:10 highlights the futility of his material pursuits. "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless." Solomon learned too late that his heart's desires had led him away from God's path. In his earlier years, Solomon had a close relationship with God. He had constructed the temple as a symbol of God's presence among his people. However, over time, his numerous foreign marriages, alliances, and compromises with idolatry distanced him from the Lord. He had forsaken his first love, the God of his youth, who had appeared to him in dreams and granted him unparalleled wisdom. Solomon's writings reveal a man who had experienced the highs and lows of life. In Proverbs 3:5-6, he once advised, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will direct your paths." Yet he failed to adhere to his own wisdom. In his quest for earthly pleasures, he leaned on his own understanding and strayed from God's straight path. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, Solomon offers a final piece of counsel that encapsulates his reflections. "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." These words, penned at the end of his life, capture the essence of what Solomon had come to realize, that obedience to God is the only true path to fulfillment. Solomon's last day served as a somber reminder of the fleeting nature of earthly pursuits. He had been granted the greatest of gifts, but squandered them by turning away from God. As he faced his final moments, he recognized that his wisdom, wealth, and power were worthless without a heart devoted to the Lord. In Ecclesiastes 7:29, Solomon articulates a poignant truth. "This only have I found. God created mankind upright, but they have gone in search of many schemes." Solomon, the wisest man of his era, had succumbed to the schemes of his own making. His final reflections serve as a warning to all who seek fulfillment in worldly things rather than in God. Solomon's story is a sobering lesson on the importance of remaining faithful to God. His last day was not marked by celebration, but by deep contemplation of what he had lost. He began with immense promise, yet his final years were clouded by regret. The wisest king to ever live learned the hard way that no amount of wealth, wisdom, or pleasure could replace a heart fully devoted to God. May we heed Solomon's final words and remember that our true purpose lies not in the pursuit of earthly gain, but in fearing God and keeping his commandments. Solomon's legacy reminds us that life's greatest treasures are found not in what we accumulate for ourselves, but in the relationship we nurture with our Creator. The last day of King Solomon's life was not marked by the joy of victory, but by the sorrow of a life that had drifted from God. Let us learn from his mistakes. It's not how you start, but how you finish that counts. May we all strive to remain faithful to God until the very end. Thank you for watching. If you found this video enlightening, please like, share, and subscribe to Bible Light for Life. And remember, true wisdom comes from following God with all your heart, mind, and soul.